Well, we're back. It's time for lab number 8. We're going to start here and start building out tier 0 gateways. And what we're looking at here, if we come out and look at our diagram, we've got a little bit more that appears to be going on in the diagram. But this is what we're going to be working with right here in this hashed box, right? We've got our tier 1 gateway and our tier 0 gateway, right? We're going to call this one OSPF-T0-GW01. And that's going to have an uplink across VLAN 200 to our BIOS router. We're going to attach that interface into OSPF area 0. So NSX does support both OSPF and BGP as dynamic routing protocols. Here we're going to set up just OSPF. Right? So that's what we're going to get into in this lab. Now, the first thing we want to do to prepare for this lab is to make sure NSX is open. That's the only place. It's not quite the only place we're going to work. We're also going to work with potentially with vSphere, but really probably more with our external system because we're going to validate that configuration is going to happen, or that it worked rather, that we can communicate from outside of NSX to inside of NSX. So we're going to build our gateway. We're going to interconnect our tier 0 and tier 1 gateways. We're going to look at it. We're going to test. Right. So I want to make sure that NSX Manager is open. And in networking here, we want to go not to tier 0 gateways, but to uplinks. Now, why do we want to go to uplinks? Well, because I have to create a segment for the uplink interface, that interface uh, between my tier 0 gateway and my external, right? I need to create a segment for that uplink interface. So we're going to call this OSPF uplink. We're not going to connect it to a gateway. Now, this is going to be a VLAN segment. It's going to be a VLAN segment. We need to configure this segment for VLAN 200, right? So I just tabbed to the next field here. You could have hit enter as well. That'll work. Or clicked out of the box somewhere, but you plug in 200 to the VLAN box, and now you see that configuration badge there. Now here we want to go ahead and just take this configuration. We're going to save it. We're done. And it says, do you want to continue? And no, we don't. We just need that segment configured. And see, there we have it. There's our VLAN segment. Now we can go to tier 0 gateways. And in the add gateway dialog, we do not want to select a VRF. We've got another lab on that later on. We want to create a tier 0 gateway. And we're going to call this OSPF T0GW01. And I'm going to describe this real quick. There we go. Now, we do want this to be an active-active, right? So we'll come back to the lab guide here. We do want this to be active-active. And we want to associate this tier 0 gateway with edge cluster 1. So we're finally using edge cluster 01. We'll go ahead and come down here and we'll save this configuration. And yes, we want to continue configuring. Right? Here's a case where we want to continue configuring. We want to continue configuring because now we want to add an interface, and that's down here under this interfaces header. Now, I didn't point this out a minute ago. This was grayed out until I created the gateway object. This was grayed out. So we're going to go ahead and continue the configuration. We will go ahead and set this. And now we can just come in here and add an interface, right? So we want to set our interfaces. We're going to add one. What are we going to do? We're just going to call this OSPF uplink. Let me spell uplink correctly. We want it to be an external interface. We have an IP address of 192.168.200.2. And just like everything else, we do need this insider notation for our mask. So 192.168.200.2/24. We'll go ahead and connect this to a segment. We want to connect this to our OSPF uplink segment. And let's go ahead and associate this interface, create this interface on SA-NSX Edge 1. We're going to leave the MTU as blank. That's going to default us to 1500 bytes. That should be just fine. We're not going to worry about proxy ARP or neighbor discovery or URPF mode yet, anything like that. So we'll go ahead and save this configuration. Now we've got an uplink. It says uninitialized. If we refresh that, there we go. It's successful. So the uplink has been realized in the data plane. So we'll go ahead and close this. It's actually programmed in. It's actually there. Now we want to come down. We notice that the BGP is enabled. We need to turn that off. Let's go ahead and turn that off. Toggle that off. And just for good measure, let's go ahead and turn everything off here in the BGP header. I don't know that it makes a whole lot of difference, but that's what we've got in the instructions to do. So let's go ahead and just turn it all off. And then we're going to come in here and expand OSPF because that's what we're looking at configuring here. So we'll go ahead and turn on OSPF, and then we have to set our area definition. So let's come and do that. We have to define the area or areas that we want to work with. So here we're going to come in and add in area 0. It's a normal area. We are not using any authentication here, right? We're not doing anything fancy. We're just going to save this as is, and then we're going to go ahead and close the area definition box. So now we've got our area definition set. And then we're going to come down here to OSPF configured interfaces, and we'll go ahead and configure that up. And I want an interface configured. We're going to select an interface on this gateway, right? OSPF uplink. We're going to select an area. We just configured area 0. We'll go ahead and leave the network type set to broadcast, and that is that, right? We've got our OSPF enabled, which we would hope since we're configuring an OSPF interface. So we'll go ahead and save that. And now we have in progress. Let's refresh this, and now it's successfully programmed. We have our OSPF configuration programmed into the gateway. So now what are we going to do? Well, we've got OSPF configured, right? Let's go ahead and save our configuration here. And then we can view our neighbors. Do we have our neighbors? I don't see any neighbors yet. Let's refresh that. There we go. There we go. I just wasn't patient enough, was I? Now we have a neighbor at 192.168.200.1, right? The ID there picking up is 210. We've got a couple of interfaces on that upstream gateway, but here we see a neighbor. We have a full state. We see our counters. We see a retransmit request and so on. And we can see these statistics, and they'll show up and continue to process as we continue on. So there we go. We've configured OSPF. We have an OSPF neighbor now. That's pretty great. That's pretty great. Now, we also need to tell our gateway what prefixes to put into OSPF. We're not actually sharing any information at this point. Yeah, we've got a relationship with the upstream gateway, but we're not sharing any information. That's what route redistribution is all about. So we want to go ahead and in our route redistribution, let's turn off BGP, turn on OSPF, right? We'll redistribute into OSPF. We're going to go ahead and set our redistribution. We don't have any redistribution rules right now. We have to add one. So we'll go ahead and build that out. What are we going to call this? We'll call this How about OSPF route redistribution? Now, even though we toggled the switch for, uh, we toggled the switch for OSPF and BGP, we're going to go ahead and have to change this, and then we'll set our redistribution. Now, here, what do we want? Well, we've got connected segments on our tier one that we're advertising from the tier one gateway up to the tier zero, or we're advertising these up to the tier zero. We want to redistribute them into uh, into OSPF. Right. We'll go ahead and grab static routes for tier one gateways, and then just in case we decide to put anything directly behind the tier zero, let's do static routes and connected segments for the tier zero gateway as well. Right. We're going to go ahead and apply this. That's all we need here. We'll click add to add the redistribution rule. We will apply those changes. And now we need to save our route redistribution. All right, we'll save all of that. And at this point, we should be done with everything. So now we can come in. Oops. So what have I not saved? I didn't save the BGP configuration. There we go. We've got a lot of save buttons. So there we go. Now our tier 0 gateway is all configured. Now, we're still not actually sending any information to OSPF, because look at this linked tier 1 gateways, right? I've got no gateways, I've got no segments. So what do we want to do? Well, we want to hang our tier 1 gateway off of this OSPF gateway. So let's go ahead into our tier 1 gateways and edit the tier 1 gateway we created in the previous lab. And now we're going to come in under this linked tier 0 gateway, and we'll go ahead and specify the OSPF T0 gateway 1 that we just created. So we'll save, close editing here. So what does this look like? Did we get it right? Let's come over to network topology, and now we see 3 segments attached to a tier 1 gateway, attached to a tier 0 gateway, attached to some upstream peer, right? And if we zoom in a little bit, right, we start to see names for these things. Now notice we have our OSPF uplink segment over here. It's just kind of hanging off to the side, and it's just not doing anything. Well, it's hanging off to the side here just because of how we have programmed this view to work, and so all of the segments kind of show up here in a row, and well, we don't have any virtual machines attached to the OSPF uplink segment. So that's going to be here. That's just going to hang out over here on the side. Don't worry about it. What we're really worried about in this context is that we have our. Oops, I didn't want to zoom. Move that over. There we go. I wanted to make sure that we had T1 Gateway 01 connected to OSPF T0 Gateway 02. And what does this look like? Let's look at the configuration, right? Active mode, active HA. We can see the edge nodes. So we're only looking at SA NSX Edge 01. That's the only edge node here. Uh, you know, do we have routing and forwarding tables? We can pull those down. We can look at BGP neighbors, except we've turned off BGP. We can look at interfaces and things of that nature. So here we have our uplink interface on edge node 1. We can actually see some statistics, right? Some basic statistics about that interface. So that's kind of cool. We can also double click on this gateway, and that shows us the fabric view. Well, what does the fabric view show here? Well, it shows the gateway itself, the gateway object. We show the gateway object resides on edge cluster 1, right? So we have a service router on edge node 1, and then we've still got a distributed router component that spans the infrastructure. So we have a good bunch of stuff here, right? So there's my uplink interface. Everything looks good. Now, now we test. So, we might want to go back to a web server, right? And this is something that we didn't tell you to open up in the preparation, right? We didn't tell you to open up vSphere, but we do give you the information here if you need to, right? Let's launch a web console to say Web 01 because that's what we've been using. And let's ping 192.168.200. Well, let me get my mouse cursor in here. Can I ping 200.2? Let's not do that there. Let's do my count. Let's add that in. And look at that. I can get out to my upstream peer. Now, we also say to check the 210.2, but we shouldn't be able to get to that. It really doesn't make a ton of sense that we're going to get to that. And that's okay. That's okay. 200.2 is our upstream. That's the only one that needs to work. So, can I get the other way? Well, we can go one step further, and we don't tell you about this in the lab. 172.20.10.80 is your desktop address, right? We might have seen that. We might have observed that when we were looking at the banner on the desktop. Can I ping that? I can ping my desktop. That's pretty fantastic. How about this desktop? If I open up a command prompt, how about 10.11? Can I get to my Web 1 server? I can. How about App 1? It works. How about Database 1? That works too. We can also make sure that we can get to the application itself. We'll open up a new tab in our browser. We'll come into 3-tier app and we'll say, oh, 3-tier app access. Yeah, we realize that it might be unsafe, but that's okay. And there it is. We can get there. We can look at that, and we can see that we can get there. That is great. So there we have it. That's all there is to configuring a Tier 0 gateway with OSPF. In the next lab, we're going to do the same thing, except it's going to be with BGP. So come back. We'll go through this all over again here in just a couple of minutes.